Hello and welcome to Vkind Connects. I'm your host, Shabnam Islam. And it's a new year and we're celebrating Veganuary all month long with a series of extra special Connects interviews asking members of our Vkind community why they went vegan and how it changed our lives. And our guest today is Brigitte Gemme, all the way from Canada. Brigitte, it is such a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome.
So let's get down to the nitty gritty. You come from a lineage of dairy farmers, right?
I do. As far as I know, my mother's father was a dairy farmer. I'm pretty sure that many others among my ancestors were also dairy farmers because I come from rural Quebec. So either they were dairy farmers or some other kind of animal farmers. And my father took on the farm after my grandfather passed away, and he was the operator of the farm for probably 3, 4, 5 years. I'm not sure. And I know that my father deep down was an animal lover. When he passed away a few years ago, I was going through the pictures and I had like dozens of pictures of like my dad trying to talk to chipmunks and hummingbirds and geese. You know, he was always trying to connect with animals somehow. And I'm sure he didn't, it didn't sit well with him to be farming the animals. Also, after the cows, we had pigs, and that can't have been really fun. And thankfully, when I was about like 4 years old, my parents transitioned to plant nursery. They didn't change their diet or mine, but at least we were no longer, going through herds of animals as we were before.
And so that wasn't your initiative to go vegan. You were talking about there might have been some sort of unexpected online interaction that transitioned you. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I've been a lifelong somebody who likes to call herself an environmentalist, a green citizen. And when I was going into elementary school, recycling was the new thing, and I remember we had this human chain transporting a newspaper across the school to recycle them. It was a really big thing. And then I moved away from the farm to the city, and I was commuting by bike always. And if you're bothered when people ask you like, where do you get your protein, like it's nothing. It's actually friendly compared to people that are driving their car trying to push you off the road. That is not friendly, but that's the kind of interactions you're used to as an urban cyclist, right? Especially at that, 30 years ago. And so you become really emboldened in this, all the reasons why you're a better person because you're cycle commuting, right? And I think sometimes as vegans, we can be a little smug. Well, certainly cyclists can feel the same. And so
I'm a cyclist, so
you got it, right?
I feel you.
If the helmet fits. So I really thought I was doing the right thing, but then somebody on this like internet cycling forum or whatever told me, well, if you fuel your bike rides with steak, well, you might as well be riding a Hummer. And it turns out somebody did the math, and it's not quite as clear cut as you'd want it to be, but that just shocked me. On that day, I was like, what? I had never considered the environmental footprint of my food. It was a complete, blank spot in my vision. I never thought about it coming from this environmental perspective, right? And keep in mind that my two favorite things to eat were blue steak, like rare meat, and blue cheese. So that really hit home for me. And I started going down the rabbit hole, doing a lot of research, reading a lot of books about the environmental footprint of food. And I was like, well, this sucks because I do like steak and cheese, but I'm going to have to take one for the team and at least go plant-based at home because I didn't want to get into too many conflicts. And even in California, I was living in California at the time for a year. There weren't that many vegan options at restaurants. Right. It was still mostly vegetarian. So I would eat vegetarian at restaurants and I would eat whatever. If I was at my in-laws, they would just give me steak or something. And I was like, oh, that's my chance, And I stayed like that, like a plant predominant flexitarian kind of thing for probably a couple of years. And then my second child was born. And I had nursed, I had breastfed my first, and I did the same with my second child. But I had read all those books about the environmental impact of food. I had read a lot about nutrition. I knew by now that I was pretty safe for myself and my kids to eat plants. And I had started reading about the ethics of animal agriculture too. And I remember it was in the middle of the night because you do a lot of breastfeeding in the middle of the night with an infant. And it struck me, I was like, what if somebody came and took my baby to get my milk and did, not so nice things to my baby? And I was like, I can't keep going like this. That's not right. And that's when I became vegan for the animals, in addition to having been plant-based for the planet previously.
And it's interesting you say that, Brigitte, is because you're very educated. You have a PhD. Is that correct? Doctorate in sociology.
Yeah.
And so it goes to show you can be very educated, and yet sometimes we don't make intelligent choices. We don't always connect the dots, right?
And I think being born and raised on a farm in rural Quebec, in a place where, I don't think my ancestors had much of a choice. I mean, they could have eaten just potatoes, but really it was all about survival, and animals were a tool, if I can say. It was a resource for survival. Animals were either working. I mean, we had dogs when I was growing up, but they didn't come in the house. They were guard dogs. The first dog I was aware of was a shepherd, a German shepherd that would actually round up the cows. They were not like cute companions to pet, actually quite the opposite. They were really outdoor, hardened creatures. And so for me, it was part of that culture where animals were in support of us, kind of like the Catholic idea that animals are there for us, the idea of dominion. And that was a really big part of the culture. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think now we live in a context where we have so many options. Now, there's people on Earth that live on a small island and all they have is fishing, right? And that's all they can do. And I don't blame them for that. Like, they can't grow chickpeas because they just don't have land. But we do, and we have access to grocery stores, and we have access to all those resources. And we have no excuse to make better choices from a nutrition standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, and from an ethical standpoint too. So that's where I am today.
And so what's next? It seems like you've not only changed your purpose, your thought, you've changed your entire career trajectory based off of your transition to a plant-based diet or plant-based lifestyle.
At the same time as this was going on, I mentioned we were in California for a year for my husband's work, and I was working remotely, and I was really starting to consider my options because I had been working in support of research as a research manager for a number of years, partly in the field of clean energy research and also in education. And I was the one writing, a lot of grants or a lot of documents for elected officials trying to get us funding. And I was fully aware that the promises I was writing in those documents that we were making in terms of the clean energy that was going to come down the line and we would live in a clean energy heaven had very low chances of coming true anytime soon enough to save us from serious environmental degradation and seriously detrimental climate change. And I was like, these are all great ideas. I love our researchers, but it's not going to happen at the scale that it needs to happen fast enough. And I was becoming really frustrated. And as I mentioned, also having another child, and then you're reflecting, what am I putting my children up for, in the future? And I was ripe for a career change. And I had the feeling that I needed to do something that had an impact right now. And food is the one thing that can make a big change really fast at scale as well. We couldn't change tomorrow, like literally in 24 hours, the whole system. But we could very rapidly, in just a few years, transition a large proportion of the planet population to eating a lot more plants, a lot more legumes, which also would be better for their health, which means that our public health costs would also decrease, which would reduce the pressure on government to constantly push for economic growth, right? So I was like, we really got to do something about that. And at the time, having a new child, being very busy at home, and I was like, I need a job that I can do from home. And I decided that I would teach people and empower them to make more vegan food at home for themselves and their loved ones. That would be healthy food, that would be making them feel good also from a moral perspective, because that was the big thing for me that I didn't anticipate. When I made that change, as I said, I did this for environmental reasons first. And then I realized how good it made me feel. It was like this, there literally was like a click sound, an epiphany. It's like, this actually feels better. I feel more aligned between my values and my daily life. And that feels really good. And I like to share that feeling with my clients. And a lot of people that I work with, they're not vegan. They maybe think they will never be vegan. But if they
Says every vegan before they go vegan.
Exactly. I said that before. I mean, you would have, I apologize. His name was Daniel, a coworker that I had at some point that was vegan at a time when I didn't even know the name existed. It was the sole vegetarian I knew, but I remember he had tahini with pita bread that he bought at this like Lebanese grocer that we had close to work. And I'm sure I made stupid jokes about it. You know, I'm sure that the screaming carrot, that must have been me. I'm so sorry. Okay. We've gone through that, but everybody has the potential to change once they open their eyes and their hearts to different ways of seeing.
Absolutely. And what's the name of this company that you are running now? This mentorship?
It's called Vegan Family Kitchen. And for the most part, I tell people what's for dinner because my mom always said the worst thing about dinner, it's not cooking, it's not even cleaning, it's deciding what to do. You know, what am I going to make? And I provide meal plans to people. I also coach people and cook with them on weekends. That's my favorite thing to do. Every other Sunday, we get together on Zoom and we do batch cooking. And that is so awesome because when it's Wednesday night, you love your Sunday self so much for filling the fridge with, you know, excellent spaghetti sauce and maybe some pre-baked tofu and roasted vegetables and some other dressings that you can use. And it just makes weeknights a lot easier. So
it just makes people happy, you know, having a fridge full of healthy food already partially prepared just makes people happy.
Totally.
You know?
Makes you feel so empowered. And I also like to help people make pizza dough. There is nothing simpler in life. I mean, you can make it complicated, but really it's flour and water and yeast. Okay. And a lot of people think, oh my God, pizza, it's like the pizza gods make pizza, you know, not me. No, you can just make pizza. It's really easy. And you just feel all of a sudden like you're in charge and empowered with your own nutrition and your own health because the food we eat, it becomes our bodies. Like every cell of me is made from stuff I've eaten before. It's worth it to put in a little effort and to put some love into the food we eat. And I just really love what I'm doing now.
Oh, that's beautiful, Brigitte Gemme. Brigitte Gemme. I
Thank
love
you.
her name. I just love this name. Brigitte, if you could give one last message to the audience who's teetering on the edge of trying a plant-based lifestyle, what would you say to them?
It's a cliche. I hate saying this. You've heard it 1,000 times, but I do not know anyone who's done this transition in an enlightened way that has ever regretted it. It's the only regret is not doing it sooner. It's the same for everyone I know. And once you begin, it's like you feel so much lighter in your heart, in your soul, in your body. It's fantastic. Come along for the ride.
And there you have it. And that wraps up this episode of Vkind Connects with the only Brigitte Gemme. To learn more about Brigitte and her wonderful healthcare, vegan food and mentoring services, check out Vegan Family Kitchen. And to watch this episode and many more of Vkind Connects, go to www.vkindconnects.com.